A very warm welcome to each one of you present here. I hope I deliver what I intend to deliver today. I have a small presentation also along with this. So I would at first screen share it. Okay. I would also start my lecture with an invocation, a small one. Lakshmi Natha Samarambham Nathayamuna Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam. So we all know Avadhana, or the art of Avadhana, is the topic of discussion for this lecture series, in which I chose to select the psychological perspectives of Avadhana, because I feel, and of course it is true, that we can witness various cognitive components when an Avadhana is performed. So I chose to put forth my psychological perspective of how I view Avadhana, and my intention through this lecture is to give an outlook of how psychological components play an important role in Avadhana, and to ensure that it is not the psychological component that entirely plays. Way back before we knew what psychology is, as Westerners claim, we had our own of Indian way of living, which is, Indian psychology, as we can term it to be. So this is also an attempt to prove that also. So the topic that I have chosen is exploring Avadhana, psychological perspectives on exceptional cognitive abilities. At first, we will know what is Avadhana and how it is performed in a very quick outlook, after which I'll get into my cognitive. So I was talking about Avadhana. So Dha, Dharana, Poshana is the root word of Avadhana. So we have certain technicalities like Ava is the prefix, Dha is the Dhatu, and Lut Pratyaya, with which we get the word Avadhana, which means Chittaki Ekagrata, which means attention, advertence, presence of mind, awareness, attention, intentness. So it is also called as Dhyanam or Bhakti, the devotion towards one particular thing forever. An exhibition of mental concentration, multitasking, a literary skill, erudition, and wit. So the practice of Avadhana, paying complete attention and focusing on a single object while simultaneously performing several other cognitive tasks such as memorizing, composing, reciting poetry, playing chess, counting the rings of a ball, etc. In Abhinavagupta's language, it is called as Avadhanam Yoga Rupa. I have given two contradictory definitions here, if you all can notice. One is the other one is Avadhanam is attention. Avadhanam is mental concentration. Avadhanam is involving several cognitive abilities on one thing. But the last definition that I've given here is Abhinavagupta, a famous literary scholar of literature of Sahitya, has said Avadhana to be a yoga rupam. So he has Avadhana as one step ahead of all the sensory organs and the outputs of those sensory organs. So he says it is beyond our sensory organs and our perception. But Western psychology talks about Avadhana or accepts Avadhana only till the fact that you use your sensory organs, you perceive, your attention, your retention, your dharana, your manipulation, and your power to perceive. All these things are repeatedly again and again told as cognitive components by the Westerners or by the new psychologist, new era of psychologist. But Abhinavagupta in olden days has told the Lakshana of Avadhana as a yoga rupam. It is a rupa which is beyond our sensory organs, a rupa that is beyond our concrete perception. It is at the abstract level, is all he's trying to say. How it is possible, we will know it in some time. So we all know how Avadhana is performed. Avadhana is nothing but holding on your attention or carefully attending on one particular thing. So it is Indian way of looking at Avadhana is, it is a type of skill. It is one among the different arts that we consider, in which there is one person who's called as Avadhani, who faces many questions, and there are prichakas around him. If there are 8 prichakas, then it becomes Ashtavadhana, wherein he faces 8 kinds of rounds. But if it is a Shatavadhana, then there are 100 prichakas, 100 questioners, and the Avadhani, who tries to answer several questions, faces all 100 questions parallelly. And if it is a Sahasravadhana, a one step ahead, then if it is a Sahasravadhana, then 1,000 questioners are put forth in front of the Avadhani, and Avadhani tries to answer all these 1,000 members here who are trying to pose different questions on the same topic of concentration or attention. So this is called as Ashtavadhana, Shatavadhana, Sahasravadhana, based on the count of Avadhana. If you consider content of Avadhana, then it becomes Sangeeta Avadhana, Sahitya Avadhana. You can have Bhasha Avadhana, you can have Ganita Avadhana, you have Chaturanga Avadhana, you have different kinds of Avadhanas, and still we are exploring several Avadhanas which are still to be explored. And today, I'm very glad and proud to say that previously Avadhanas used to have limited number of rounds. Today, the young scholars, the budding artists, the skilled students or young minds have started exploring new rounds for Avadhana, new rounds to explore their cognitive abilities. Previously, the rounds used to be fixed, but now there are different rounds that have come up. Say, for example, if it is a Gita Avadhana, previously there were only 8 rounds. Now people have started, creating new rounds, which is once again creation becomes a part of creativity, which is called Sarjanatmakata, Nutana Srishtihi, Nava Srishtihi, Navinata, Navyam, which you call as. Now here we can see types of Avadhanas, Ashtavadhana, Shatavadhana, and Sahasravadhana. As I've told you, Ashta is 8, Shata is 100, and Sahasravadhana is 1,000. Avadhana showcases entertainment of superior mastery. So you have higher order thinking and lower order thinking. Higher order thinking exactly occupies your superior level of cognitive abilities, if I have to put in understandable words. Now, what I am intending to say here is, see, mastery of cognitive abilities of observation, memory, multitasking in multiple modes of intelligence. Now, you have different theories of intelligence, and some of the scholars present here have just gave me, suggested me few links which talks about Gardner's multiple intelligence. I'll come to that. There are similar theories which are presented and propounded by various Western psychologists, which are used in Avadhana. What I'll do today is, I will take those theories. I will also talk about how Indian way of Avadhana is perceived or performed, and we will have a dual mode of presentation here. My intention is also, to bring about this in front of you. So this is the reason why I chose this topic, if I have to be brief in what I want to say. See, you can see these things: literature, poetry, music, mathematics, calculation, puzzle solving. So these are some of the famous areas where Avadhanas are performed. Now, what I'm trying to say is, what are those cognitive abilities which are used in these Avadhanas when an Avadhani performs? Now, let's generally see the process of Avadhana. What are the process of Avadhana and how many rounds are there? Just in a very quick, short span of time, We'll finish off that and we will switch over to cognitive abilities. Now, there are different rounds in an Avadhana. In short, I shall explain each. The first round is, I'm sorry, this is not getting. The first round is Nishiddhakshari. Nishiddha Akshari is nothing but, eliminating a letter. Samasya Puranam is you're given with a problem and you have to give a solution on your own by creating new poetry, new verses. Dattapadi is giving words to compose a poem. We were in the process of Avadhana. So what I was trying to tell here is the fourth one is Varnana, giving a theme to compose a poem. So I give you a situation or a word or an instance, and the Avadhani tries to, give a poetry or verse based on the Varnana. Ashu is nothing but spontaneously you try to create a poem. And Vyastakshari is to frame certain verses in certain way in which letters are positioned in the way Prichaka asks. Akhanda Patanam or Purana Patanam is nothing but you continuously try to chant from wherever the Prichaka asks you to do. The best part in all these things is an inhibition that is, involved in the entire process of Avadhana as psychologically claimed, which is aprastuta prasanga, unnecessary talk. So when Avadhani tries to focus himself on the Avadhana, on the Prichakas, on the statement of problems, there will be a Prichaka who is assigned with aprastuta prasanga, which means he has to induce unwanted, unnecessary talk or speech from which he tries to tell you that it is me who's trying to interrupt you, your attention and your concentration, and you may have to continue your concentration as and when. So kindly accept me. Yes, you may have to continue your concentration in spite of me asking you with unnecessary questions. So aprastuta prasanga is very, very important because cognitive abilities are inevitably tested in other rounds, but here someone wantedly tries to distract your attention and you try to exhibit your talent of answering the unwanted questions along with the way you answer your necessary questions that are intended to be told by you. So here there are 8 people and each one has got one component. One after the other, each one posts questions and the Avadhani has to answer accordingly. This is in a way a mind which is focused and with multitasking, tries to run behind each question and tries to answer along with exhibiting their creativity and spontaneity in the content that is fixed for Avadhana. Now we can see there are different types of Avadhanas here: Sangeeta Avadhana, Sahitya Avadhana, Nritya Avadhana, Yaksha Avadhana, Ganita Avadhana, Netra Avadhana. There are Chaturanga Avadhana. There are different other Avadhanas as per the content. Now, let's get into the types of cognitive processes that are usually discussed by the psychologist of the Western area of study. Let's see what are the different components of cognitive abilities discussed at first. Later, we can discuss how these are used by the Avadhani in the process of Avadhana. The first one is attention. The second one is language. The third one is learning. The fourth is memory. The fifth is perception. And the sixth is thought. Before getting into cognitive processes, let's understand what is cognition. Samyanatmakam, which we say. What is samyanam if we have to be precise? Samyanam is nothing but something that is related to your mind, your mental processes, your mental capacity, all the mental processes that are involved or done by your mind. These processes put together is called as cognition. So cognitive processes are nothing but all those things that happen in your brain in order to learn, acquire, grasp, or reproduce things which you have learned previously, or that you want to learn, or that you are exposed to. Now, these are types of cognitive processes that usually we try to process through our brain. What are they? Attention. Attention is nothing but focusing on a specific stimulus in the environment. For example, there are different stimuli that we can see around us. There are different responses too we can see around us. A stimuli is nothing but something that tries to grab your attention. Response is something that you give towards that stimuli. For example, we are in a railway station. We need to find out which platform we are in. We need to check the train number. We need to check how many of us are there with us, if the total number of people have arrived or no. We need to check the timing. We need to see if we have to get some medicines or no, or something to eat, some such water bottle or some other thing which is required. And we have to get into our bogies or the board the train at right time. These are the tasks that we have to do. But as soon as you enter your platform, the very first thing your brain is tuned to listen to is the announcement or the notice board, from where you try to see the departure timings or the arrival timings. Why is this tuned? Because the very first thing what you have to do is to locate your train in the right platform. Now, for that, you need to have a focus on some such stimulus which is there in your environment. Your environment is your railway station, and the stimulus that you have in front of you is the board in which the list of trains are, displayed. Now, what I'm trying to tell you is there are different stimulus around you, which are people are going, there are different luggages, there are different platforms, there are different trains, there are different attractions near you, there are different distractions near you, but you try to be attentive towards that particular board which serves your purpose. Hence, your attention is on that board. Language. Language and language development are cognitive processes. Without cognition, a small kid cannot learn any language, may it be mother tongue or any other thing, that involve the ability to understand and express thoughts through spoken and written words. This allows us to communicate with others and play an important role in thought. Now, what is this language all about? If you call a grammarian and ask him what a language is or what its importance is, he would say there are different prefixes, suffixes, there are root words, there are gender, there is singular and plural, there are different forms of grammar, forms of parts of speech which needs to be focused when you take up a language or when you learn a language. But for a normal person with a normal cognitive ability, if he has to understand what a language is, he would say language is something that is used as a medium or a channel which expresses your thoughts and feelings. Now, this communication makes you express your thoughts, your feelings, your expressions, your critical thinking, your creativity, your spontaneity. So for that, you need a language. Remember, once again, I'm telling you all these things with regard to Avadhana and its processes. Now, what is learning? Learning acquires cognitive processes involved in taking in new things, synthesizing information, and integrating it with prior knowledge. Every human has some prior knowledge out of learning, out of experience, or through several other sources. With the prior knowledge, he tries to relate it associative learning. Now he relates it to the new topic, and then he uses his prior knowledge to build this newly gained knowledge. Now, if this is the case, then learning happens through rigorous practice, by imitation, by synthesizing the information, by integrating several known informations to build new information. So this is how learning happens. Now, when Avadhani sits in an Avadhana or performs while performing Avadhana, Avadhani tries to learn, synthesize new information, integrate with his prior information and tries to build, new creativity with spontaneity out of learning. The fourth one is memory. We all think, understand, or misunderstand Avadhana to be a skill of memory. No, it's just not memory that plays an important role in Avadhana. Memory, of course, holds an important seat, but memory is an important cognitive process that allows people to encode, store, and retrieve information. It is a critical component in the learning process and allows people to retain knowledge about the world and their personal histories. Here, I would like to quote Albert Bandura, who's supposed to be a behaviorist and also a cognitivist. He has developed social cognitive theory, which talks about how a person learns, how learning happens. So he quotes his environment and behavior to be the two important aspects of learning. And he says, learning happens in certain way. Let me put that in these simple words. Now, a person tries to learn something from somewhere in a classroom or from a news or from a lecture series or from a YouTube talk, may be anything. What happens here is a person tries to learn through different sources. When he tries to learn through different sources, he tries to store different topics in different rooms of his brain. Brain contains different rooms: a room for mathematics, a room for music, a room for spatial studies, a room for kinesthetic studies. This is also told by, multiple intelligence theory. I'll come back to that once again. So, different things are stored based on the content, based on the, memory capacity, based on the limitations of the content. So it is stored in your brain. Retention of the stored memory is in your hands. It's your responsibility to retain what you have gained. How do you retain? By being in constant touch, by practice, by again and again, repeating what you have learned, by challenging yourself consciously that I would retain this. Maybe, in equal intervals, you can change your practice abilities or sessions, such as daily in the beginning. Slowly, you can give gaps. Slowly, you can give a week gap, a month gap, and then practice regularly in regular basis. Now, this is called as learning, in which synthesize, you analyze, you integrate, and by associative learning, you try to learn new things. Bandura talks about imitation. So he first says you grasp knowledge, you keep it, you store it in your brain, and then you try to retain that knowledge for a very long time in your brain. Once there is an external motivation or an internal motivation through some such source, you try to exhibit the knowledge that you have previously got in that particular instance, which serves the purpose of the art. So this is how Bandura tries to explain social cognitive learning, which involves social abilities and cognitive abilities put together. Memory is an important cognitive process that allows you to encode. First, you grasp what the other person says in the way he has said, in the sense in which he meant, and in the contextual, clarifications in which he tries to mean what he means. Now, you try to store it in your brain. Once again, you retrieve information when the need arises. It is a critical component in the learning process that allows people to retain knowledge about the world and their personal abilities. Content could be anything, but retaining part involves lot of practice, years of penance is all I can say. Perception. See, the world revolves around perception. Avadhani may find it difficult to answer a particular question, especially when there is a sandarbha given, when there is a context given. He tries to think again and again, takes some time, and then immediately he answers. Then what happens there? He tries to perceive how the Prichaka has told him. He tries to think of how audience would perceive it. And he gives a new name to it by forming new verses to the question that is posted to him. So in this, there is a huge, different kind of cognitive abilities, components that are involved. He first grabs the question, he understands the question, and according to the situation, he tries to create his spontaneous verses and tries to reproduce it in front of the audience or the listeners in such a manner in which it is convincing to people. This once again involves perception. It is very, very subtle, and we must understand this here. Thought. Let's all admit, and let's all try to understand, admit that we all have some kind of thought process, thought patterns inside us. It is essential part of every cognitive process. It allows a human to engage, to make decisions, to solve problem, which is supposed to be the highest form of learning, and higher reasoning, higher order thinking, as we call in psychology. Now, these thoughts, how are they formed? You try to store data as and when you receive. Interest plays an important role here. If there is a conflict in interest, you don't try to store, or there is no storage of data in your brain automatically because your mind is elsewhere. Now, if you're not able to encode, once again, you cannot store it in your brain. If the data is not stored fully, decision making is very, very difficult, as in the case of Avadhani, when a situation is given to him. Problem solving, when half verses of a shloka is given to him, he needs to fulfill in his own way, keeping in mind the metrical note in which he has to fulfill it with all the constraints that are mentioned. Higher order thinking, he needs to accumulate, he needs to bring up his previous knowledge, he needs to integrate associative learning, and thus this higher order thinking, reasoning works, and he produces the rest of the verses for a single pada that is given to him. So these are some of the types of cognitive processes that are usually experienced or processed in a normal human being. See, the human brain responds to various stimuli related to our senses. Memory connected with these senses resides in these areas. One can infer this by the laws of memory connected with a specific sense when the corresponding region in the brain suffers damage. This is purely as scientists perceive what brain does. So there are different neurochemical reactions that happens. There are engrams, there are memory traces in our brain. What happens here is the brain responds, human brain usually responds to different stimuli through different senses. But what happens is when you realize you have memory loss, you understand the value of memory. When you realize in one particular content, you're not able to retrieve your memory, while in another content, you're able to retrieve your memory. So this is because there is a memory loss in one particular aspect, and there is no memory loss in another particular aspect. So why does this happen? So psychologically, there are different cognitive components, as I've told you. So before getting into this, let's now understand how avadhanis are created. I attend an avadhana. I look at a stage where 8 prachakas are there, where 100 prachakas are there, or 1,000 prachakas are there, and one avadhani gladly, grandly sits in front of them and then faces the questions and answers every single question and shows that multitasking ability of him. And this fascinates me, and it asks me, why not me in his place? That sankalpa alone takes him with a rigorous practice to that stage of avadhana. One attends an avadhana and feels, I too can do this. When a normal human being in front of me is able to do this out of vigorous practice, why not me? Now, what are the things that he happens to process in the process of avadhana? Grasping. See, there is a hall of audience, different reactions, You have a pressure on you that you have to answer all the questions, because you are going to be an avadhani, and who will face all the questions that are put forth to him. He needs to grasp the question, he needs to store it, he needs to process it, he needs to understand the appropriate answer out of all the answers he has got, and he needs to answer them in time without having tension or stress, because the output also matters a lot. For this, he needs concentration. As I've told you, it once again takes you to SR theory, stimulus and response theory, which is also called as classical conditioning by Ivan Pavlov, or it could be, B.F. Skinner's reinforcement theory. What is the reinforcement? The reinforcement is your vigorous practice that you have been doing to strengthen your behavior. You need to understand the climate, you need to understand the environment, you need to understand in what context the prashna has been posted to you, and thus you analyze all these things. With this reinforcement, you try to come up with new spontaneous answers. In the process, you try to recall. You recall previous avadhanas. You try to recall how different your questions were and how you try to answer those different questions. And then there is another process involved here, which is called as parallelism, because in between, there is a pritchaka who peeps in and says, I am the aprastuta prasanga, the unwanted topic that needs to be involved in between questions to divert the topic of discussion to avadhani. Here, I would like to, bring in Clark Hull's drive reduction theory, in which he talks about K. There is a formula, SER is equal to SHR into I into K, uh, uh, into K, which is, and I here is inhibition, K here is motivation. When you bring in appropriate motivation to avadhani, he tries to come up with the answer. Here, motivation could be a short span of time also. And you can get inhibition inside by aprastuta prasanga. Inhibition is nothing but involving him into some other totally different topic, which is not at all about what he is currently thinking on. This is called parallelly involving him into two different things. In spite of all these things, Avadhani tries to reply to this aprastuta prasanga, as well tries to reply to the question that is exactly posted to him. Now, what I try to tell here is, we as a normal human being should try to understand that the skill of Avadhana, the art of Avadhana, tries to inculcate all these new effective cognitive abilities inside you. Retention. Retention happens with the way you store content in your brain. For example, if you normally store content in your brain, it is a normal process. If you have too much of interest and you listen with all enthusiasm and encouragement in you, your retention capacity becomes more. The longer you retain, the more you listen with interest, the longer is your retention capacity. Once again, if you are not distracted by any other thing mentally and physically, your retention capacity is enhanced. The data that you store has more retention capacity. Let's also see now how retention, is enhanced. So this is about several cognitive components that are involved in an avadhani when he performs. We all know that memory is generally divided into two, which is short-term memory and long-term memory. Short-term memory is nothing but, if I ask you what you have had today for breakfast, you try to answer what you have had, probably by taking 1 or 2 seconds to think and then to process. This is short-term memory. If I ask you posting a date last year, and if I post a question saying, what breakfast did you have? You cannot answer it. But for an avadhani, he can remember in which avadhana, what type of question was asked to him, and how different was his answer on that particular day, on that stage. And the time of Avadhana in which he has performed will also be quoted by him. Such is the training that is given in the course of Avadhana to an Avadhani. Now, there are some psychological perspective on cognitive abilities. What are those perspectives? Let's just see them now, one by one. Points to remember when we enhance our cognitive abilities. An object is best retained in memory only when it is completely understood and all tasks related to it are complete. So if something is incomplete, there is an inhibition that is, peeped into your brain, and that stops your cognitive process that is happening in a spontaneous manner. So if you have to retain something strongly in your memory, you ensure that you have understood the entire process completely. And then the tasks that are related to that should also be completed. For example, when an Avadhani faces different questions, he tries to answer all the questions along with the distraction that is presented by Aprasthuta Prasanga's Prichaka. Memory is not very sharp when one is in the process of understanding the object or is observed in an activity connected with it. See, when you try to grasp something, the time in which you grasp a particular data or a piece of knowledge, during that processing time, you will not have a good retention. You're not supposed to break your processing at that point of time. What you have to do is you need to have an overall understanding for the entire process and those activities that are related or connected to it. And I add something more here. Once you understand it completely, try to practice it once or twice on the same day, especially with the way we live, with the way our lifestyles are, with the food that we have. It's important that we try to practice once again without giving much gap for the first few times. In Avadhanam, the performer must remember both challenges and solutions. See, an Avadhani should be able to understand or remember that there are different challenges around. He may have to keep up his promises. He may have to understand the questions. He may have to think in a different manner. He may have to face all the inhibitions, which is called as distractions here. He may have to face the audience. He may have some other pressure. So keeping all these things aside, he needs to focus on the question and think and answer accordingly and find an appropriate best solution to the challenges he faces in Avadhana. Many people think memory by itself is sufficient to perform Avadhana, which is not right. There is a partial process of synthesizing the data, partial process of analyzing the data, partial process of higher order thinking involved, partial process of creativity involved. Why I use the word partial? Because everything put together forms this cognitive ability that is used by an Avadhani. Avadhanam is not about memory, but it's about spontaneity and creative imagination. Spontaneity is not by a preparation, not by a preparedness, but spontaneously you try to enjoy the verses, enjoy the content, enjoy the topic of Avadhana, and you try to reply to it, with which the Pritchaka himself enjoys, and the spectators too have a great time in the hall. Now, creative imagination is nothing but adding newness to what is existing by an Avadhani. Memory here is a mere tool that is helped as a channel. It is just a tool for an Avadhani to retain a particular information in his brain. It's easy to remember repeating patterns of meter. If the chandas is repetitive, if the same chandas is used again and again, Avadhani finds it comfortable to have a spontaneous, show to run. And words are conducive to retention. See, known words are conducive to retain. Unknown words are difficult. Once again, let us come back to the psychological practical of span of attention, where In span of attention, students are taught to experiment with known words and unknown words, and the attention span is usually calculated in that. Let us all remember, in a bank account, we have last 4 digits. Beside an auto or a vehicle or a bus, you see there are 4 digits. For an ATM card, you have only 4 digits. So a minimum, a number of remembrance for a normal human being is 4 digit. That is why it is 4 digit that is applied everywhere. But in span of attention, one can realize if it is known alphabet, if it is known word, a person can have more attention. And if it is unknown, then he limits himself to certain level. And after that, he is not able to reach the higher order of attention. So this experiment proves it very clearly that retention happens with a conducive environment, with conducive words which are repetitive in nature. Avadhani finds it easy to retain in his brain. References of Avadhana and mental processes, the art of spontaneous creation, according to Rajashekhara, who is a famous Sanskrit scholar, a scholar of Sahitya. So he says there are two kinds of pratibha, which leads you to Ananda. Now, recently, when we had a program on Avadhana, which was called as Avadhana Sangama, we happened to know the exact meaning of how a person lives in the state of Ananda. What is a state of Ananda? A spectator, when he views or listens to Avadhana, he should be brought into the state of Ananda, which means he forgets himself, he becomes Leena or he becomes Nimagna into the Avadhana or into the show, which is mesmerizing him, because of which he forgets himself. So here there are two types of pratibha that is involved. One is Karayatri, the other one is Bhavayatri. So Karayatri pratibha is nothing but creative genius, and Bhavayatri pratibha is nothing but faculty for appreciation of poetry. The poet possesses both creative and appreciative faculties. Where does the point of different lies is, Dandi is a poet who says Naisargika Pratibha, Nirmala Shastra, and Ananda Abhyuga. These are three kinds of causes for a poetry. One is inborn genius. The other one is clear-cut understanding of Shastras, whatever he is reading, and out of which he cultivates his Pratibha. The third one is constant application of his talents and genius. Now, what happens? Whatever is learned is put into application every single day. He tries new things every day, and he gets into Ananda Abhyuga. Rudrata and Kuntaka, these are two other Sahitya scholars who has also mentioned three other different kinds of causes for poetry. One is Shakti, which is inborn intellectual brilliance. The second one is accomplished knowledge of text and literary works, which is Vyutpatti. The third one is Abhyasa, which is constant practice of composing a poetry. This you can take it when it comes to Sahitya Avadhana or Bhasha Avadhana. Causes. One is Vamana gives three causes of poetry. One is worldly knowledge, learning of different disciplines. The third one is Prakirna, which is miscellaneous. Now, Prakirna once again is divided into 6 different other causes, in which Avadhana is also one amongst them, which is concentration of mind. The reason why I have quoted this here is because let's understand that this is not just limited to memory, which is once again treated as a component of psychology or cognitive ability. This is much beyond that. Now, I would just conclude within 10 minutes, Neelabji, if you can give me. Can I take 10 minutes more?
Yeah, sure, man. Please go ahead.
Okay. Cognitive abilities, as we have discussed till now, Avadhana is nothing but the partial improvisation of poems using specific themes, meters, forms, or words when it comes to Bhasha Avadhana or Sahitya Avadhana. You can have several other Avadhanas according to the content. But I have just taken this as an example because language once again forms a part of cognitive expression. Now, cognitive psychologists have found that there are inherent limitations in the human capacity for multitasking, and this is quite obvious in our daily lives. I'll tell you a small example. See, you try to boil milk, simultaneously you go for you put clothes for in washing machine to wash, and simultaneously you run around in home. This is nothing but multitasking. Sometimes there is a point in each and every one's life wherein the milk is overboiled and it overflows, and we try to lose one task amongst all these multitasking. So sometimes it is human tendency to not to focus on one task while performing multitask. It's if not every time, sometime. Generally, the brain is thought of as constituting two primary parts. One is the left and the right hemisphere, as we all know. The left hemisphere always deals with logics, reasoning, analytical thoughts, analytical capacity, skills. The right concerns itself with feelings, emotions, and intuitions. Feeling of oneself, feelings of others too. So, organizing, expressing, and understanding one's feelings along with others is directly treated by the right hemisphere. The capacity to reason, plan, solve problems, think abstractly, comprehend complex ideas, learn quickly, and learn from experience. These are exactly called as cognitive abilities. Cognitive abilities are skills your brain uses to complete essential day-to-day tasks like thinking, learning, reading, remembering, speaking, listening, paying attention to something. See, these are done by each one of us in different spheres, different walks of our life. Different tasks are performed with all these cognitive abilities. One thing here that differentiates us and Avadhanis is he tries to practice Avadhana in one particular pattern for days, years, and months together, which makes him live in that skill altogether. We do not live in multitasking. We do multitasking to finish our work and serve the purpose of our everyday routine. Cognitive abilities occur naturally in the brain, but you can further develop and strengthen them by challenging yourself. One of the methods is to challenge yourself. Importance of cognitive skills: comprehension, focused attention, brainstorming, logical thinking. I'm sorry, there's a small spelling mistake there. Curiosity and motivates learning. So why are cognitive skills so important? Why parents try to send students to abacus classes in the first place as soon as they grow up or when they are in childhood stage is because their analytical skills, their arithmetic skills, their logical thinking in a brainstorming session should be improved. So this is the reason why they send them to abacus classes in the first place, because that not only enhances your mathematical arithmetic skills, but it also tries to enhance your arithmetic, your analytical, your synthesizing skills, all these things put together, and it involves certain amount of motivation which leads you to learning. Now, comprehension and avadhani, unless and until he does not understand what the question is, he will not be able to answer it in the way it is expected to be answered. Focused attention is the attention that is being provided by the avadhani on each and every prachaka, along with the context, along with the way his memory is, along with the data that he is stored, all these things put together, along with attention, he tries to answer all the posted questions to him. Brainstorming session is nothing but in between. When Aprasuta Prasanga happens, there is Adhyaksha who tries to, convene the entire show. Vocabulary, new intentions, new way to think, and a certain amount of critical analysis. Logical thinking, of course, is required. Otherwise, you will not be able to answer the question in the appropriate manner. And the motivation that is being given, it creates a certain amount of curiosity and motivates you to answer the questions as posted to you. Pointers for an exceptional cognitive abilities. By exceptional cognitive abilities, I am not here to say what are those skills, how they are perceived by Westerners. Rather, I would like to tell here that these are the pointers when one has to adapt Avadhana as a skill and one wants to practice it, he needs to understand and apply these pointers when he learns or practices Avadhana. Now, these pointers are totally related to these exceptional cognitive abilities. What are they? Memory's position cannot be exactly located within the brain. Let us remember, memory is nothing concrete. It is abstract. It is there. With the outcome of the behavior of yours towards certain statement or a question, you try to know or understand this is how your memory is. Hence, it is dynamic. And in that, it is scattered across various regions and is relative to stimulus. The passages of connection between neurons from one to another in the entire neural framework, which also shapes our perception of the world, this alone happens to be the reason for our memory to work. We understand that our memory is dynamic. My memory is still there, and I have not lost memory. The very proof of this is knowledge with the other and answering it by retaining the data in the memory. One must regularly dwell on the object of retention in order to enhance this type of memory. Now, one has to dwell, one has to live in that skill, in the art, and one has to regularly practice again and again to enhance this type of memory in oneself. So this is supposed to be exceptional. One of the prime reasons for memory loss is getting distracted during the process of grasping information. Now, say for example, you have been practicing for 6 months, all of a sudden you get demotivated and you come out of this living in the art form and you stop this practice. Once again, if you continue after 3 months, don't expect yourself that you will continue in the same stage where you have left. You need to restart from the beginning, and then once again you have to start. Your memory and your skill would have, to some extent, actually, extincted, or it would have vanished on those skills which you acquired by regular practice of yours previously. So all I'm trying to say here is you need to live in the retention part again and again to enhance your memory. One of the prime reasons for memory loss is getting distracted during the process of grasping information. You try to grasp one information. If you're distracted by another stimuli, you try to put your memory in that stimuli, that is not going to work. You need to stagnantly stay in one particular stimuli and focus on that. Completely understand that and go for the next one. Let's not do multitasking while grasping something. Multitasking has to be done when you apply what you have grasped. Let's be very clear about it. In the task of multitasking, while grasping something, we fail to learn everything together. A piece of information gathered with mental composure is most likely to last long. See, you say kaya vacha, kayena vacha manasa, which means you, with all mind, with soul and whole, if you try to listen to some topic, I think the totality of the concept, the center point of that entire topic is directly retained in your brain for a very long time. Although it is extremely difficult to achieve mental composure during Avadhanam, performers must consciously train themselves for it. See, consciousness and mindfulness have been the, milk giving cows these days, if I have to be very brief. We don't have mindfulness centers in India, but in foreign, you the business of the hour, if I have to say. Mindfulness is nothing but You keep your mind in whatever you do and you do it. As simple as that. Which means you're not distracted in any way. You're fully involved in one thing and you do it. But what happens here is often we do not respect what we do. It's very subtle. Please try to understand. Mindfulness is not something very big. It's difficult to do, but once you start doing, you will notice a huge change in the lifestyle of yours, if I have to be very brief. An object or event stays in our memory for a long time only in the form of gist and not specific details. I've seen a movie. What's that movie recently? Oh, Bahubali, I've seen. So Bahubali is supposed to be a overseas movie, which is acclaimed for its grandeur, which is acclaimed for its historical perspective, which is acclaimed for its minute detailing. But after a few years, I remember the nature of the memory to, have or retain only the gist and not the specific details. When would you actually retain specific details? Only when you have continuous conscious practice over a particular thing. The import remains while the body of details fades. So this is all I was trying to say here. Now, how to enhance cognitive skills? See, we all know this very well. Even then, I thought I would make it a point to, tell you. In order to enhance your cognitive skills, you need to have good sleep. You need to have conscious effort. See, I am not good in this round. Let me make Dattapadi even more vigorous so that I'm good in Dattapadi's round. So you need to identify where you're lagging behind and work on that. Play brain games. So if you're feeling tired, if you're not feeling good, if you're feeling low and you want to have a break with the continuous work that you're doing, go for games that stimulate your brain and your strategies. Practice particular skills in a particular way as it is expected by you in a particular form. Understand and improvise the nuances. Every art, every skill has its own nuances, subtlety. Please understand them, pick them, and practice them. Engage in physical activity to train your brain and your physical system. Challenge yourself always. Unless you don't have a target, you don't have an aim, you don't have a challenge, you won't be able to proceed further because the world is very, very competitive. So I hope I have given a brief intro of how Avadhana is and the art of Avadhana and how cognitive skills are played in between the process of Avadhana and how Avadhani manages to perform this Avadhana, keeping in mind all those skills that we have discussed now. I have just presented that something that I thought I should.